Greetings. Thank you for joining us. Today is January 11th, 2022. Welcome to the first lecture of the new year, the year of the tiger. And we can get really technical about tigers, but I won't get into that right now. I'm Steve Shields, President of Royal Asiatic Society, Korea. On behalf of the officers and the council, I welcome you to our lecture. By way of reminder, lecture content does not necessarily reflect the opinions or positions of Royal Asiatic Society, Korea. The Royal Asiatic Society traces its beginnings to India in the late 1700s and was formally chartered in London in 1824 by King George IV. The Royal Asiatic Society of Great Britain and Ireland granted a charter to the Korea branch in 1900, the fourth year of the reign of the Gwangmu Emperor of Korea. RAS Korea expresses sincere thanks to our generous sponsor, Asia Development Foundation, for their continued support. We especially thank our members who have paid their annual dues. Your dues provide essential primary funding for RAS Korea. Without your membership, we would not be able to host the lecture series. We would love to have you join us if you're not a member. It takes only a few minutes to sign up. Membership gives you the opportunities to support the world's first and oldest Korean studies organization. For 122 years, we have strived to explore and promote all facets of Korea's rich heritage. Members receive our annual journal transactions. Members of RAS Korea are also recognized reciprocally by Asia's RAS affiliated societies, as well as the London-based original RAS. See our website at raskb.com for details. I will post a link in the chat box momentarily. If you're not a member now, we request a one-time admission fee. Please refer to the donation information on your screen for PayPal and bank transfer information. I'll also post it momentarily in the chat box. We're joined tonight by Kim DongJin, the founding chairman of the Hulbert Memorial Society, a commemorative organization honoring Dr. Homer B. Hulbert. Professionally, DJ was a banker, having worked for over 30 years in the cross-border banking industry in both Seoul and New York, mostly with JP Morgan Chase. His last position before retirement was at JP Morgan as managing director and country manager for Korea. After reading Hulbert's The Passing of Korea, published in 1906, in college, DJ was struck by Hulbert's passion, scholarship, and accomplishments in the service of Korea, particularly for Korean independence. Most importantly, he realized that Dr. Hulbert's story had nearly vanished in the study of that critical time in Korean history. He quickly took on a lifelong task of ensuring a place for Dr. Hulbert in the annals of Korean history. The Hulbert Memorial Society was organized in 1999, and since then initiated and accomplished numerous events, including a statue of Hulbert in downtown Seoul, and honoring Hulbert with the Golden Order of Merit for Culture and Arts by the Korean government, posthumous honor. DJ wrote the first biography of Dr. Hulbert in 2010 and has since then published a number of other books on Hulbert. He recently published a full-fledged biography of Hulbert titled Homer B. Hulbert, Joseon Must Blossom. It's in Korean, and this makes for a very interesting facet of what Mr. Kim is doing, that we have lots of Hulbert's publications in English. He's translating them and writing about them in Korean for a Korean audience. So after the lecture, there will be time for questions. So please welcome DJ Kim.
Okay.
Take it away, DJ. It's all yours.
All right. Let me wait a second. I'm sorry.
It's all right. We'll get to that PowerPoint momentarily, I'm sure.
Okay.
There we go. Now, DJ,
All right.
do something for me.
Uh-huh.
At the top in the menu, it says slide show.
Uh-huh.
See that? Click on that, please.
Yes.
Yeah, click on that.
Uh-huh.
And then a new menu will show up.
Okay.
Over on the far left, it says 처음부터.
Okay. Click.
Click on that. Yes.
All right.
There you go.
Okay.
And you should be able to move those slides by just hitting the arrow key on your keyboard.
Okay. All right. So sorry, I'm very ignorant of doing this in Zoom. Anyway, thank you, Steve, for the introduction. You know, as introduced by Steve, now I am chairman of the Hulbert Memorial Society, and over 1 hour and through 1.5 hours, your very precious time, I know. So I want to make it valuable for your participation tonight. I'll try. Okay. Homer B. Hulbert's dream, Joseon must blossom. This title, actually, this is the exact translation of my book, which I published in 2019, about 2 years ago. Okay, the direct translation of Hangul, Korean alphabet, into English. And why Joseon must blossom? I think probably at the end of my lecture, you may understand why I titled it. Also, a very interesting indication by Steve, why Joseon is spelled J-O-S-E-O-N. Originally, Koreans, in foreigners lived during 19th century and early part of the 20th century. They normally used C-H-O-S-E-N, S-E-N, not S-U-N. About that later, I will explain. But currently, according to Korea's official Romanization regulation, Joseon should be spelled like this, J-O-S-E-O-N. That's why I followed that, just for your information. Then let me start. What I want to share with you, actually, with Homer Hulbert, it takes a long time to really introduce him to you in specific. But today, my focus will be, how Homer Hulbert met Joseon, how he came to Korea. Secondly, what were his real accomplishments? Third, about my book, Joseon Must Blossom, how it came to that paragraph, that word. And fourth, Steve, in his introduction, mentioned that my goal is to put Hulbert, stand in Korea's annals properly. That is my goal. So about that, I suggest you think of that. And also last, 4 years ago, what's his name? Mark Knapper, who was acting ambassador to Korea, US ambassador to Korea. He participated in memorial service. He was second ambassador participated in Homo Hulbert's memorial service. First ambassador participated in Thomas Herbert, still he's alive. I think that is about 2001 or 2002. 2002. He participated. And in the meantime, most of ambassadors, although I invited, their response was not positive. But Ambassador Lippert, he was very actively, participating in the events. But he left Korea, and Mark Nepper, he came to our memorial service, and he said he believes, Homo Hulbert was America's most valuable legacy planted in Korea before Korean War. That's what he has said. That's why I'm introducing over here. Okay, I'll go next. Homo Hulbert, he was born Vermont, during Civil War in 1863, and his father was at the time a Protestant minister and also a president of Middlebury College in Vermont. So he went to school up to St. Johnsbury Academy in Vermont, and next in 1884, in 1880, he went to Dartmouth. Dartmouth was his mother, Homo Hulbert's mother, was the great-granddaughter of the founder of Dartmouth. So Homo Hulbert actually was born from education and Christianity, blood. And after graduation of Dartmouth, he went to Union Theological Seminary. But at the time, seminary was 3 schooling. But to come to Korea, he dropped out of school. So he just completed 2 years. I visited Union Theological Seminary and to trace about his school records, but school didn't have full record. Only they showed me alumni list there at the union, but he studied there for 2 years. This is very important, I think. But when he came to Korea, actually he was not missionary. He came as educator. And I over here introduced to you family precept. Character is more fundamental than victory. This is really my word. My word. I have to keep it to, because Korea society, Korean elites, I think must remember this precept. So everybody wants to win all the time. The process or the cause to win, they disregard, ignore. But I think, rather than just grabbing the victory, how he get to the victory, that's very, very important. That's why I'm introducing over here. And also Homo Hulbert, I found him, he's very venturous and of course, very tenacious. And he likes sports and music. That's what I introduce you to about him. This is the picture I got from Hulbert family, Hulbert grandson. This is his father and his mother. And this is Homo Hulbert. This is Mrs. Hulbert and daughter Helen at the time. This is 1983 picture. I said he's 63 Korean because he came to Korea 1886, and the remaining 63 years, he passed away in 1949. Really, he lived for Korea for 63 years. and his unbelievable accomplishments. That's beyond human beings' ability. So he was an educator, linguist, journalist, historian, and musician, missionary, and civil rights activist, and Korean independence activist, really, for these 3 years. So now I'm calling him 3-year Korean. And I want to, you know probably very well about Korea's opening to Western society, the history. But couple points I want to indicate. Japan, they opened door to the Western countries way earlier, to European countries, Netherlands, like that. But with United States, Admiral Perry, Tokyo Bay showed up, 1853, and 1858 officially they had a treaty signed 1858. But Korea, Korea 1882, we had a treaty with United States at Incheon, at the time, Jeomulpo. We signed the treaty with the United States. Even this treaty was not initiated by Korea. This was pushed by China, Lee Hong-jang, because Japan is coming to Korea. So Lee Hong-jang was afraid of Japan. So that's why he invited United States to come to Korea. And Korea, just like, just accepted offer from Lee Hong-jang. So there was a 24-year difference of the treaty with the United States. This makes big change about the history. That's what I want to mention. Actually, U.S. minister, first legation minister was Lucius Foot, arrived in 1883, and Korean diplomatic mission Bobingsa was sent to United States and toured America. And they came to Korea, and their first proposal to King Gojong was, let's have American-style school. That's the first thing Korea has to do for better civilization. That's what they offered. So, 1884, actually, school project began. But there was a coup in 1884, 갑신 정변. In the year of 갑신, there was a coup, and that lasted for only 3 years by young revolutionists. So the school opening project postponed, put off by 2 years. In the meantime, Ireland, 1884, came to Korea, Horace Allen, and Appenzeller and Underwood missionaries arrived in 1885. And first state-run modern school opened, in 1886. And next, I want to introduce an interesting thing. Actually, Korea-US had some the two skirmish small conflict. In 1866, General Sherman, this is a civilian merchant ship anchored at Taedonggang, North Korea, Pyongyang, and they asked for opening of Korea. But Korean government at the time, said, no, you go away. But they didn't go. So eventually, ship sunk. Korean soldiers set fire and sent it to the ship, and all ship fired, and all crews are dead. This is a very sad thing. And 5 years later, Admiral Shupelt, no, this is not Admiral Shupelt, Admiral Rogers. He led the U.S. Navy fleet and arrived at Gwangdo and asked for the opening of Korea. But Koreans, again, very persistent. We do not open, you go away, go back to your country. So this skirmish, actually, Koreans, their record says 430 people got killed and 1 US soldier killed. But actually, I think more than 1,000 civilians and soldiers killed during this war. The reason I'm over here introducing, this time was great opportunity for Korea to have the diplomatic relationship and open the door to Western countries. But Korea really lost the opportunity over here in 1871. So regretful for me as a Korean. That's why I'm discussing with you about that. Okay. And this is the stone monument. This is 1871. The Korean Daewon-gun, the regent, at the time Gojong was king, but he was too young. So Daewon-gun was regent, reigning the country. He asked all provincial governors to set up this stone monument. This means like foreign devils go away, and we won in the war. Actually, we lost 1,000 people. U.S. soldiers lost just only one life. So this is very sad story, for Korea. And this is the treaty, U.S. and Korea. I want to indicate 3 things. Over here, this is Chinese characters, and this is English. But Korea, we had the alphabet, but alphabet was not official language of the government. Actually, until 1945, Korean alphabet was not official language of Korea, although King Sejong invented Korean alphabet, Hangul, in 1446. So this is very sad, no Korean alphabet. And secondly, over here, the United States of America and Kingdom of Joseon, it says, C-H-O-S-E-N. So this Joseon, the Joseon means like Joseon dynasty, Romanization. Joseon was introduced to foreign society by Japanese or the American scholars, European scholars lived in Japan. That's why Japanese call Joseon. They do not call Joseon. That's why they just adopted C-H-O-S-E-N, which is Japanese Romanization. And also over here, Article 1, it says, if Korea is, say, interfered by third country, or America is interfered by third country, either Korea or United States exert good offices. It means like involves in the interference. So make amicable solution. So Korea, even Hulbert, they really trusted this article. So if Korea is invaded by third country, United States would support us. But this was a big mistake. Later on, it was identified. This is the picture I collected. I got this from the library of Dartmouth. When I went to library at Dartmouth College, this was just inside the envelope. Nobody, saw this. So I asked librarian to, take the envelope off, and I got this picture. I am very happy with that. So this is the picture at the time of graduation of Dartmouth. And he came together with Gilmore and Bunker. Gilmore just left he came with his wife and he left Korea 1 year later. But Bunker, he stayed in Korea a long time. So this is very meaningful, education project in Korean education history, because first the state-run modern school, and this is also the first Korea-US joint, modernization project, very important. And this school, everything was like a US. So at the time, the new semester started September, like United States, not March, currently Korea March. So everything was like, because Korean king at the time, Gojong, asked Hulbert and teachers to adopt to US style. And all teachers, all students were fed by the government, food stamp, and everything was like government expense. So American education, this is. And one thing I want to mention, actually in 1884, at the time, US education committee at the time, John Eaton was the chairman of education committee. And his friend was Homer Hulbert's father. They went to Dartmouth together. So John Eaton asked, Hulbert's father, why don't you have one of your three sons, sent to Korea? And Hulbert was second son. And Hulbert's, elder brother, Henry, he said, well, why I got that, Bundaks, and he refused to go to Korea. But Homer Hulbert volunteered to go to Korea. But that school opening project was put off. And so the remaining two, U.S. Education Committee selected three, Hulbert and other two. But two, they said, no, I won't go to Korea. So they dropped out. But Homer Hulbert waited for 2 years, until 1886. And during that time, he studied about Korea. So he went to Griffiths, and also he was very good at French. So he read French books, because Roman Catholic, they came earlier, so they had some Korean history books and Korean language books like this. So with his waiting for 2 years, he could come to Korea. That's a very important thing for him and for Korea. The school was opened, Homer Hulbert arrived 1886, July 5th, and school was opened 1886, September 23rd, with 35 English students. I think Kim Jae-bum 선생님, out of 35 English students, there was one student, Iwanyong, who was, Homer Hulbert called arch trader of Korea. Iwanyong is one of 35 English students. And he was born Vermont, and he went down to New York for Union Seminary. And when he came to Korea, New York, he came by train all the way to San Francisco. So in San Francisco, he met Bunker and Gilmore over here. And he came to Yokohama, and Yokohama, Nagasaki, and Jemulpo. That is about 1 month it took at a time. I think Peace Corps members, you are very easy, even though you came in 1960s. I think less than 1 day. Okay, but at the time 1 month. Yugyong site was current Turkish Palace. This is Turkish Palace. Wall is structured later around here. This is American embassy, ambassador's residence over here. This is Homer Hulbert left, the map, Homer Hulbert left. I think this is only sketch of Cheongdong, who lived. Look at this, Appenzella. Henry Appenzella lives here, and Russian legation, Heron, Dr. Heron, Dr. Allen, and missionary Underwood here. American legation over here. This is my house. This means Hulbert House over here. This is very interesting. This is Seoul and this is Westgate. Seoul, there was another gate over it. Now this, broke down. But there was a, also gate over here. So Baje High School, Jones, Ihwa, the women's, Ihwa Hakdang, Underwood Orphanage over here. So Homer, he left this, and I got this from his, grandson of this. And my book, I said earlier, I published this book. This is Hulbert Joseon Pioneer, where I included this map. Okay, and he served at this Yugyong Gongwon for 5.5 years. Then what he did in Korea, what he did in Yugyong Gongwon. First, he, taught kids, students, and also, learned Korean, almost mastered Korean. And he said, next day he started learning Korean because as soon as he arrives Korea, he met Underwood. Same day, on the day he arrived, he met Underwood. And Underwood already spoke some Korean. So Homer Hulbert, he said, oh, I would like to speak in Korean like Underwood. And he learned Korean alphabet in 4 days. He could write and he could read in 4 days. I said this to Jeffrey Jones, just Jeffrey Jones. Jeffrey Jones said, I did in 1 day. he wrote and he read. That's what he said. And more important thing, Homer Hulbert, he said in his autobiography, I found Koreans are ignoring this great alphabet, Hangul. He found that within 7 days after learning Korean alphabet. That's what he said in his autobiography. So anyway, so he arrived in July, and in December, from December, slowly he could speak in Korean. He taught in Korean. And next year, May, not freely, but significantly, he taught in Korean. Within 2 years, he had verb list, because he thought verb is most difficult thing for foreigners. So he listed all verb variant and say grammar, even grammar he mastered in 2 years. So after 2 years, he was very fluent about the Korean language. That's why over here last he built trust with Gojong, who supported the modern school, because Gojong, you can speak to Gojong in Korean. So Gojong asked him to bring the students to Gyeongbok Palace, and where Gojong tested English to students. At the time, Homer Hulbert prepared everything. So Gojong was, really, fascinated with Homer Hulbert's fluency of, Korean. And during this Yugyong period, he found that all Koreans are to him very clever and very rational, realistic, close to the Anglo-Saxon, and also education, DNA is great from his experience of teaching. So he said, first mission for Joseon should be the education. So that's why he himself has long plan to educate all Koreans, whole Koreans, not only school students. He had dream of that from this time. And this is he arrived in Korea July 1886, July 5th. This is one day later, 1 year after Underwood and Appenzeller. Then in 24 days, July 29, he wrote an article to Republican newspaper in America, letter from Korea, it says over here. And also during 5.5 years, he wrote 34 articles to US, UK papers. I collected all of this. So most of RAS members who studied about Homo Hulbert, they have Korea Review and Korean Repository articles shown there. But actually, there are more articles. He contributed to overseas papers, and this is the first one I found. And this is about the cholera. In that year, in 1886, in Seoul, total population was about 250, about 300,000 people. And out of them, 10%, about 30,000 people got killed by cholera. So current COVID-19, what? How many Koreans got killed? 5,000, 6,000 right now, out of 50 million. So real risk for everybody, including foreigners. So very difficult to live in Korea for foreigners, but they stayed here. And in this article at the bottom, so he went to the Sosomun gate and he counted the dead bodies one by one. So that's why he averaged it. And so his statistics, he came up very accurate over here. Every morning he went to the gate because at the time, Seoul bodies, dead bodies should be, carried away through only 2 gates from inside the castle. So the Homo Hulbert did really count it by himself. And at the bottom of this article, he says, all countries should support Korea, particularly Christian countries, for Korea's civilization efforts. That's what he said. I was so amazed at this. Just like after 24 days from arrival, how you can think of that, support Korea, particularly Christian countries. That's what he said. And the same year, 1886, October, this is, a title is Chinese Tyranny in Korea. As soon as he arrives in Korea, he found that, oh, China is really interfering, actually reigning almost Korea at the time. So Homo Hulbert, cannot accept this. That's why he wrote this article in American paper, to American paper. So actually, his independence, Korean self-autonomous independence, movement, he started from 1886, actually, from China, later Russia, later Japan. This is another article. Also, this is very good article, but I'm going to skip. And he left Korea in 1891, end of 1891, from that school, Yugyong-Gongwon. Then in 1890, he traveled to Pyongyang, and after he traveling in 1891, he contributed to Japan Weekly Mail in a series for 10 times. So actually, Robert Neff, the Steve, you are RAS member, he hinted me on this. That's why I could get whole 10 articles. I really thank Robert on this, and I translated this into Korean. And just last year, August, upon Homo Hulbert's 72nd memorial service, I published this book, Korea as Seen from the Saddle. This is the book, not thick, but I translated into Korean. And he went to with Appenzeller from Methodist, and also Samuel Moffat. Some of you know his name, Samuel Moffat. He's from Presbyterian. Okay, so three together traveled to Pyongyang, and Homo Hulbert was fascinated by Pyongyang, and he found that, he said, people of Pyongyang so resistant to injustice. They cannot endure with injustice. That's what he found. And vitality for better life is very strong, Pyongyang people. That's what he said over here. And many interesting things over here. Someday I publish it in English as well. And during this trip, he brought coal to Seoul and tested, returning Seoul, tested the coal quality, which was great. So Americans and foreigners, they decided to bring more. So Homo Hulbert brought 300 tons from Pyongyang coals to Seoul. So that winter, for the foreigners' fuel, the coal was used, and this was reported to U.S. State Department from U.S. Seoul Legation Office, and this was the first mining of Korean mineral. So since then, foreigners, of course, even before then, there was trial, but the actual mining of Korean mineral resource started from here. Okay. All right. And also, while he stays in Yugyong-Gongwon, the language was, his main, I think, achievement, I think. So he did really many things. And over here, this is in 1889, the two US New York Tribune. This is now merged, into New York Times. So actually, this is New York Times. He wrote article, the Korean language, in 1889. This is marvelous. He arrived in 1886. In 3 years, he could write, perfect article. This was also, I translated 2 years ago, and I, distributed this to Korean Hangul, Korean alphabet scholars. They say world, the language history should be rewritten. That's what they say, not Korean language history. That's Seoul National University Professor call. That's what he insists. Nobody could read. Even right now, nobody could read the exact explanation of strength of Korean language like this. That's what he said. So 2 years ago, if anyone would like to see book of this, let me know. I can send you. This is English. I have English version and Korean version as well. And in this the New York Tribune, over here, you see, this is R. Those R represents the broad sound of A. That's what he say. This R, so it should be attached, but there is some crack because U.S. newspaper, they cannot, this combine. So that's why this, because Hulbert, when he sent this article, he wrote in pen, and this is also O, this is O. It's an O, broad sound of O. That's what he said. So Korean alphabet firstly, debuted in Western society like this. So this is, Korean 동아일보 largely covered this with my interview about this. I found this. And this is another, miracle achievement. This is 사민필지, means knowledge necessary for all. This is 170 pages, fully written in Korean alphabet. At the time, all Korean elites, only some women's and in lower class, they used Hangul. And the Korean elites, if they use, they feel shame. Why I use Hangul? We should use Chinese characters only. That's the time. At the time, Hulbert in 1891, this January. So he started this from 1889. And next year, 1890, he almost completed this book. And this was, printed in Japan, Yokohama, because there was no, how do you call it, printing. 김재범 선생님, 납 활자를 뭐라고 그래요? 납을 영어로 뭐라고 그러죠?
lead type.
Lead.
Lead.
Lead. Yeah, lead stroke. Steve, do you follow me? In Korea at the time.
Yeah, there was no lead type. So Yokohama was the printing place for most people in this part of the world.
Yeah.
They had modern equipment.
That's right. So this was inside in the Yokohama, but this cover, this was cover was done in Seoul. Methodist publishing company, they did covering over here. And this book is the exact copy of that book. So I, made the facsimile of that book exactly, same this book, and in preface, what he said, sad, Koreans are ignoring the greatest alphabet. If you read, you can read. Some of you can listen to me. 생각건대 중국 글자로는 모든 사람이 빨리 알며 널리 볼 수가 없고 조선 언문은 본국 글자일 뿐더러 선비와 백성과 남녀가 널리 보고 알기 쉬우니 슬프다. 조선 언문이 중국 글자에 비하여 크게 요긴하건만은 사람들이 요긴한 줄도 알지 아니하고 오히려 업신여기니 어찌 안타깝지 아니하리요. this is, marvelous, preface over here. That he expressed his emotion why Koreans are ignoring Korean alphabet, why Koreans not using this great alphabet. That's what he said. I do not have time to explain about this, and he used this color. First time these maps were made in Seoul, not Japan. So this was made on the wood, on the wood. So he brought special life from the United States and gave it to Korean artists, and Korean artists, made on the wood this 9 world maps. First time, also first time in color. This was in color. This is Europe, and historical significance, too much. One thing over here, what he said, Daemado, Tsushima, southern part of southern sea of Korea, Tsushima Island, Daemado Island is Korean territory. That's what he said in this book. And Seungman Lee learned in Baeje Hakdang with this book. Ju Shikyung, a Hangul scholar, he learned in Baeje Hakdang with this book. Seungman Lee, he became president in 1948, and he asked Japan to return Daemado Island to Korea. 66 times he asked Japan, because he learned from Hulbert that through this Saminpilchi, Daemado was Korean island. But in 1895, 4 years later, Korean Education Ministry, they had Hulbert's Korean alphabet, Korean book, translated into Chinese characters. It means the book quality is great. However, we upper class, we Yangban cannot read, Korean alphabet. This means very shameful for Koreans. So that's why they translated into Chinese characters. Of course, this doesn't contain maps, but the contents are the same. This, and also, the Hulbert about the Hangul. This is the Korean alphabet. This is the other one in 1889 was article to newspaper, but this is official, article to Korean repository. If we look at Korean repository, the first page, first article is the Korean alphabet, the Korean alphabet. This is the Appenzella. This means at the time, Hulbert didn't do anything with Korean repository, but Appenzella, he also accepted this is most important article. That's why he adopted, and he put this on the first page, this article. This talks about the origin of the Hangul. And this article, he compared Korean, the Hangul with Manchu, and Tibetan, and Sanskrit over here, English over here, Korean, so Manchu over here, and Tibetan and Sanskrit. So even today's scholars, I don't know, they can compare like this. This is, and this is, I got a Westgate picture. Probably, I think this is the oldest picture of Westgate. I got this from Hulbert's granddaughter. So this is the Westgate, and all Korean, rice paddy, the roofs. This is okay. And He went back to United States 1891, December. I cannot have time to tell you the story why he went back. But anyway, he went back. To America and came back 1893 with Appenzeller's invitation. Because Appenzeller thought Homo Hulbert is so important asset for America, also for Christians, also for Methodists, because he speaks Korean and also his scholastic weight is so heavy. So invite Homo Hulbert also wanted to come back to Korea. So that's why, you know, he, as a missionary, Methodist missionary, came to Korea. And he did many things. One thing, YMCA, probably you know that. YMCA is only socializing organization in the past until 1980s in Korea. So he was the founding committee chairman. He was. People do not know about this. Okay. And this is Appenzeller, and this is Homo Hulbert. And this is Homo Hulbert's Mrs. Hulbert. And about Hangul, he left many great praise about Hangul. And one thing he said, if Koreans had thrown away the Chinese since the creation of Hangul, it would have been immeasurable blessing to Korea. But it is never too late to mend. This is what he said. And secondly, I believe that the Koreans will eventually discard the Chinese just as the English did the Latin. So he, although Koreans did not use at the time, he foresaw that Koreans someday will discard Chinese characters and use Hangul. That's what he said. And Korean alphabet scarcely has its equal in the world for simplicity and phonetic power. That's what he said. And many, good things. Okay. Okay. And I just listed major his articles and books about Korean language. Numerous. Over here, he said Hunmin Jeongum and Korean and Formosan and spelling reform and Korean and Ifade. The Ifade, I didn't know this country, but this is from Pacific, South Pacific area, Ifade country. He compared the Korean language with foreign. So many. He studied the romanization. Steve, you mentioned romanization. He romanization principle. He first made romanization principle. And this was what I found from Columbia University. The Columbia University downstairs basement. I think weird there going into there. I found this from there. I was so happy. In this respect, the Korean surpassed English as a medium for public speaking. This was the conclusion of his article, Korean language, which was contained in Smithsonian Institution Annual Report, 1903. And also his journalist, 독립신문, 서재필, created this. However, all knowledgeable things Homo Hulbert provided. And English, the Independent, this was, Homo Hulbert was the editor. Homo Hulbert was the editor, English. The reason this 독립신문 Korean version, same April 7, this is Friday, it says. But English version, this is Tuesday. Contradicting. So I checked 1896 April 7th. I found that Tuesday was correct. This. So this English independent was done by Homer Hulbert. And Homer Hulbert, he said over here, the paper was bilingual, and Dr. Jason took charge of the Korean part, and I assumed the English part. Exactly, he says. So Korean scholars must revise the history. And also he said over here, 주시경, he didn't say 주시경, but the proofreading person recommended 주시경 to 독립신문. 김 선생님, 이거 굉장히 중요합니다. 이거. And who studied the commas and spacing in Korea? I do not say Homer Hulbert alone. Homer Hulbert, Appenzeller, and Yun Chi-ho studied this. This was 독립신문. We studied the spacing from 독립신문, 1896 April, but 1896 January in Korean repository, this was article. So at the time, Homer Hulbert was in charge of this, magazine. So, and not only Korean language, he was also pioneer of Korean studies, Korean literature, the origin of the Korean people. He says Koreans are a mix of northern part and southern part. The southern part is from southern India. Northern part is way to Caspian Lake.
The Caspian
and also
Sea.
Korean poet, novel, Korean art, music art, and Korean traditional and traditions and customs. He really did, so I call him. Now there are many scholars of Korean studies in foreign countries, but I hear no one is studying about Homer Hulbert's works, articles. So please, you listening to me, talk to your friends or anyone who studies about Korean studies. Contact me, and I'll provide everything about Homer Hulbert's works. I got everything. Please introduce me to any scholars in foreign countries. This is the 1895, the origin of the Korean people. He analyzed the origin through the language, the migrant language. Okay. He was very fluent with Chinese characters as well. See here, 단군, 대백산 over here, like that. And also, Yidu, some of you know Yidu. Yidu, Chinese character, Hangul. He compared Chinese character in English. See these characters, Shimyo, Yidu, Imyo, Korean, Hamyo, Korean alphabet, Hamyo, like this. Who can compare like this? Not only one Hamyo, 하였다, 하되, 하고, 무엇인, 하사여, 하였다. Even right now, nobody can understand even this. Also, he Korean proverbs, more than 100 proverbs, he left. He translated into English and explained in English. See over here. 동작에서 욕 먹고 서빙고에서 눈 흘겨. 동작동. 동작동, he had something repenting. And 서빙고. Okay. And also Korean geomancer. He wrote the article. Over here, 지관, 내용, 좌향, 청룡, 백호, 규봉. This is marvelous article. I was really attracted by this. This is most important thing. In 1896, in a Korean repository, he contributed Korean vocal music. First time American music score was introduced in Korea. Over here, Korean 시조, Korean poet, old poet, he made music scores. Just listening to Korean singing, he made music score. Over here also, this is what kind of song, this is what kind of song, he explained. And also he translated into English. 술 먹지 말자 하고 맹세를 지었더니 술 보고 앉아보니 맹세가 허사로다. Like this. Very funny, very, very interesting, very funny. And over here also, he, Arirang, for the first time in history, Korean history, Arirang has been just sung orally. No record or nothing written. Home Albert first time wrote music scores and also poem over here. Arirang, Arirang, Arario. Arirang over here first time. So Arirang Association of Korea really, they come to Hulbert's tomb every year and they have a ceremony over here. Korean history, this, and he said Arirang will be the lasting song for Korean people. Everlasting song for Korean people. That's what he said in over here. And also other Korean songs. This is in 1899. Homer Hulbert wrote article to Harper's Weekly at the time in United States. This, I understand still this is existing. So this was very important, very popular, weighted magazine. He introduced 5 inventions of Korea, Korean inventions title. This is tortoise ship. This is tortoise ship. And 금속 활자. This is metal type. Korea, tortoise ship #1 in the world, and metal type #1 in the world. And 현수교. This is 현수교 means suspension bridge. This is first in the world. This was 1592. 임진왜란, Korea-Japan war, and Chinese Ming Dynasty supported Korea. 현수교, 임진강, over 임진강 suspension bridge was there. Homer Hulbert introduced in this article. And mortar bombarding, explosive, mortar explosive, 폭발탄. And Hangul is not the first alphabet. However, Hangul is the finest alphabet in the world. That's why he introduced 5, and this was carried by Harper's magazine in the United States. And this magazine was coded by UK and Japan as well at the time in 1899. And also, he was Korean repository from 1890, Korean repository in 1892. At the time, Homer Hulbert not involved, but 1895, Homer Hulbert involved, and he wrote many articles over here. Also, he himself, because Korean repository, gone away, so Korea Review was created by him, and he did marvelous things with this. He wrote many articles, and one thing you should know, he was the actually founding member of this RAS, Korea branch. And Hulbert drafted constitution and bylaws of RAS Korea. And Hulbert and James S. Gale, he's from Canada, and founding secretaries. They were same age and rival for scholarship. They had a big debate. This is really, even right now, nobody can have that kind of debate at the time, because two were friends each other, their families each other house visited. However, in terms of interpretation of Korean history, 180-degree opposite. Gale, he wrote first the influence of China upon Korea, where he said Korea is little China, and everything is copied from China in Korea. That's what he said. The Homer Hulbert, he immediately retoring article he wrote, Korean survival. This is the, you go to your history, transactions, your magazine transactions, #1, it carries this both, the influence of China for Korea and Korean survivors, this carries. And Hulbert said, the points of similarity with the Chinese are the exception, and that survivors of things purely native and indigenous are the rule. That's what he said. So this was a big fight. So I'm not blaming, James Gale, but he's individually himself. But James Gale later pro-Japan, and he changed his name to Ito Gale, because Ito Hirobumi, Japanese governor, how do you call it, residence general, Ito Gale. So he wanted to be pro-Japan. So this is very sad. And James Gale was at risk for his life from Korean Iwanyong, righteous army. You may have heard, righteous army. So his life was at risk. But later he confessed, I was wrong. I don't know to what extent. Someone testified that James Gale, he said he was wrong.
DJ,
And this is the letter
DJ.
to President Trump by myself. President Trump in 2017, he said he heard from President Xi Jinping of China, Korea was part of China. That's what Trump said. So I sent a letter to him. No, Korea was not part of China, because the Homer Hulbert of these Korean survivors, he has proven that how Korea survived, and China was the tributary relationship, but not suzerainty relations. That's what he said over here. And Korean nations always has been independent. That's what he said. So I said in this letter to President Trump, and I, carried Homer Hulbert. So your senior grandfather wrote this in 1900. That's what I said, President Trump. Of course, he did not respond to me. But from that time, I was put on a White House, list, the mailing list. So from that time, I get the mail from the White House every time.
DJ, I'm really sorry to interrupt,
Okay,
but
I'm going to finish very quick.
we've run out of time, and
All right.
we need some time for questions.
All right, what 1 hour? This is 8:45, so I'll do maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and I'll take questions.
Well, we have to finish at 9 o'clock.
Okay, 9 o'clock. Okay.
So we only have 10 minutes left.
All right, then I make it quick. Okay.
Make it really quick, please.
Yeah. All right. He's also pioneer of modern school. He taught in Korean schools for 20 years. So father of Korean education. This is his education, middle school, Gyeonggi High School, and Seoul National University. And also this is Homer Hulbert's, Mrs. Hulbert. Seoul Foreign School was first founded by her. So this is a picture I found in 1903. All American kids are, over here. And also he historian, passing of Korea, the history of Korea. You know that. History of Korea, passing of Korea. This is marvelous book.
Yeah.
I suggest you read the book.
I think of any of his books, DJ, The Passing of Korea is really one of the most important ones.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I read this first, this dedication to emperor and Korean people. Because of this, I became interested in Homer Hulbert. And this book has this. This book has this. Also has this. And also from here, independence activist. He studied. He said, "I am prejudiced in favor of justice, international comedy, humanity, and right patriotism." That's what he has said. This tells everything about his independence, activities. And he was night guard for Gojong, and he was the emperor's envoy. This is, and as an envoy to Theodore Roosevelt and State Department. I got it from State Department, U.S. Archives, State Department. And also with New York Times. He's interviewing with New York Times. And also 1907, Hague, Netherlands, Hague, Peace Conference. He was, also envoy of the emperor. This is the certificate, is credential. This is. Kim Jae-bum 선생님, we have this credential, but Korean scholars never mention of this. Japan says Homer Hulbert is pulling string behind the scene. It means he did everything. And he was expelled by Japan 1907 after Hague Conference participation. And even in United States until 1945, 38 years he did for Korean independence, 38 years. Sure, Korea will fight. The New York Times article. His life was at risk many times. He said, "I will stand for Korean people until I die." And Roosevelt was wrong. This is Taft-Gasra, agreement. Roosevelt was wrong. He fought with Roosevelt on this. And also after March 1st revolution in Seoul, what about Korea? He filed this statement with US Senate. The title was, "What about Korea?" His sign, and this is notarized of his article. With Syngman Rhee in Korean Liberty Conference doing things. This also with Syngman Rhee. And he, even United States, he wrote the published book like the Wizard. And this is what I found from Dartmouth, my life story. What he said over here, you cannot read this. I couldn't read this at the beginning. In hotel, I read this and I cried reading this because he said, "I worked for my whole life for Korea, but somebody may not care, but I think that is valuable thing, which was most precious asset for me." That's what he said. over here. And also, this is Japan took emperor's money. So Korean emperor interested Homo Hulbert giving power of attorney to restore money. But he went to Shanghai Deutsche Bank. Already money was taken by Japanese. So I'm working on that. Someday we have to get returned this money. This is Homo Hulbert's family. I want to show you about this. This Homo Hulbert, his wife, very family. And 1949 invitation came to 48 invitation came to Hulbert, but Hulbert's wife was sick, so he couldn't come. So 1949 again, Syngman Rhee sent invitation. So as a state, guest, he came to Korea 1949. But before coming to Korea, 1949 July, he had an interview with Springfield Union. He said Koreans are among the world's most remarkable people. This was, and the reason I'm saying Korea, Joseon must blossom. Homo Hulbert, he had a conviction that from many point of view, Korea someday will stay on the top of civilized country group. That's what he's saying over here. And the living for Korea to AP press, he said, I would rather be buried in Korea than in Westminster Abbey. That's what he said. And arriving at Incheon in 1949, this is Homo Hulbert. So almost tired. This is the last picture of Homo Hulbert. Only me got this picture. This is Appenzella, Henry Appenzella's daughter, Alice Appenzella, at the hospital. And he passed away, and Syngman Rhee is giving funeral speech. New York Times articles on the passing of him, like that. And just one thing, this is An Jung-gun. An Jung-gun is hero of Koreans. He assassinated Ito Hirofumi in 1909 in Harbin, in China. And he said in prison, Homo Hulbert is the benefactor that Koreans must not forget even for a day. Even for one day, Koreans should not. And after I, founded the Homo Hulbert Memorial Society, I did many things. Golden Order for me, I proposed to the government, and also I did a statue and many things. One thing only, when Homo Hulbert, you visit Iwanyong Cemetery, originally there was no, tombstone name over here, but I inscribed in 1999. I'm sorry. 19. Over here, name inscribed over here. This is President Kim Dae-jung's handwriting. So Syngman Rhee, first Syngman Rhee, he missed to do it. Not on purpose, but he was busy with politics. But I asked, petitioned to Kim Dae-jung, you must write, but he accepted my petition. So this is Kim Dae-jung's handwriting. So 2 presidents involved over here. And I invite many times Homo Hulbert's statue over here. You can see this is Seoul Cultural Center behind that building. I wrote many books about him. And thankfully, thank you, Michigan State University. I was awarded Global Korea Award at the time. At the time, my title, awarding address title was Hidden Hero of Korea and Pride of America. I gave a speech there. And Ambassador Lippert, he was very active with me. And he liked Samen Pilchi, the Samen Pilchi, he wanted to see this, so I gave it to him while he was here. And Mark Nepper is attending. This is the book. Okay, I say Homer Hulbert is not only hero of Korea. He must be remembered across the globe. This is my conclusion. How? And I can persuade everything why he should be remembered by the youth of the globe. I can persuade, but how do it? That's my homework in the down the road. Okay, thank you so much, and I'm sorry. Actually, I omitted many independent, accomplishments over here, but this is, I think, for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, DJ. That's he was a huge man intellectually, and his bibliography is probably more vast than most university professors. Thank you for sharing. Now, let's take a few minutes with some questions, please. Just you know the drill, folks. You use the raise hand function in Zoom, or just wave your hand at me, or write a question in the chat box, and we'll try and get around to you. If you are an annual membership, there's a question, practical question. You do not pay extra for attending the lecture. Okay. Someone asked if we could access the slides, DJ, and I've indicated that we've recorded the lecture, and so your presentation will be on the recording. I don't know if this person's wanting something further than that, as far as getting a separate PowerPoint file or something. I don't know what that person's asking. Can you let me know, please, KY? Ken, go ahead with your question.
Where did Hulbert spend the years during World War II? Where was he at that time?
World War II in, actually he settled in Massachusetts, Springfield, where his daughter was living there. And his daughter was an opera singer in Boston and New York. So he, all the time lived in Springfield, Massachusetts. So from 1907 until 1949, house was changed just once in Springfield. So he stayed in Springfield.
Thank you.
Okay. So Springfield, I found the house where he lived. But ironically, that house was owned by Japanese right now. So I want to ask, somebody sponsor to buy that house and make the house of Korean independence. That's my future plan, to have some memorial hall in United States as well, in Korea as well, also in United States as well.
Yeah, go ahead, Ambassador Kim.
Yeah, so what other plans do you have as a person or as the leader of the association?
Okay. I mean, now I think I'm running, I have been running the society for 23 years. And now, when I first started, actually nobody knew about Homer Hulbert. But now, I frequently contacted the media and also, book published like this. So there are significant number of followers of my society. So my plan is that first, in Korea, memorial hall we should have. And Cheongdong, the area currently Deoksugung, along the wall, that alley, that street should be Hulbert Road. That's what I'm petitioning to Seoul city government right now. So some monumental things I should have. So that should be Hulbert Road, because Hulbert wrote there, Samimbilchi, and Hulbert received credential for envoy, credential from Gojong through that road. So very meaningful street, that Cheongdong, along the wall. That's one thing. And memorial hall, I want to build somewhere. So this memorial hall should be not for Koreans, Korean plus also all international people. Whenever they visit Korea, where to go? Oh, there was that kind of history there. That's what I want to show. Then, to be honest, like if South-North Korea relation is getting better, if it gets better, I want to build it in Panmunjom, that area. So because I visited Pyongyang in 2008, and I asked North Korea to appoint Homer Hulbert, to honor Homer Hulbert with, North Korea as, Independence Patriot Award. We should honor him with Independence Patriot Award. That's what I'm asking North Korea. So North Korea, 3 or 4 years ago, they officially recognized Arirang was first, music scores was made by Homer Hulbert, North Korean Board of Social Science. They officially recognized that. I don't know, that's from my petition, but anyway, they started to recognize Homer Hulbert right now. So I want to ask North Korea to honor Homer Hulbert. And maybe this year, I'm almost, final touching English version of my book. So I want my book read by Americans, also Japanese. So they should know why Homer Hulbert, was involved in Korean independence so ardently. That's my another plan. And also I want to visit Vermont if COVID-19 is over, and at his birthplace, I want to have a, monumental stone there. This was where Homer Hulbert was born. And thank you, Americans, sending Homer Hulbert to Korea, something like that.
Well, I'm sorry that we have to bring this to a close. This has been really interesting to me. I've known of Hulbert most of my adult life since first coming to Korea 46 years ago. And I've read many of his books in English. So I feel like I got some good information tonight. DJ, thank you so much for your devotion to a remarkable hero of Korea and for spending your evening with us tonight. And thank all of you for joining us. Appreciate your attendance. I've got a couple of announcements. The Literature Club meeting is, the next meeting is February 3rd, 7:30 p.m. Be sure to look on the website or on Facebook for the Literature Club to see what their reading is. I think we have an announcement tonight, but I haven't had time to look at it. Our next lecture will be on January 25th in 2 weeks' time. Our speaker will be Dr. Marcus Bell. Bell is an anthropologist who specializes in refugees and labor migration. He's got over a decade of experience working with displaced people and migrant workers in Asia Pacific region. He's taught at the Australian National University, University of Sheffield, and Goethe University in Frankfurt. He currently is working in Yangon, Myanmar. He earned his PhD from ANU in 2016 and is a research fellow at La Trobe University, Melbourne. In his newly released book, Outsiders, Memories of Migration to and from North Korea. He reveals the driving force that has propelled thousands of ordinary people at risk in Kim Il-sung's worker paradise, only to escape back to Japan a half a century later. So that ought to be an interesting discussion. Check our website and our YouTube channel, where you can find recordings of past lectures. The recording of tonight's lecture will be up in a few days, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a good night and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thank you for the opportunity, Steve, and everybody. Okay.
Appreciate it. Yep. Good night,
Okay.
everyone.
Goodbye.